Hey guys, so today we are going to break down the SAVE Act and what the debate surrounding this particular piece of legislation is. It is also known as the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. It is the leading topic that is being debated between the left and the right now, as conservatives are all for it because we love election integrity, but liberals, not so much, and they are reframing it as voter suppression. So we'll see if that idea holds up. But before we get into it, please hit the thumbs up button on this video, subscribe if you have not already, and let YouTube know that you actually like conservative content, because they keep trying to shove our videos to the bottom of the barrel because they're not such a big fan of what we say. But let's get into this conversation. So what is the SAVE Act? Well, it's very simple. So if you are a liberal who can memorize like 127 different genders, this should be very easy for you to grasp. Basically, it says that you need proof of citizenship, like a birth certificate or a passport, to register for federal elections. It was an initiative led by Representative Chip Roy out of Texas, and it is supported by the dreaded MAGA movement, who are trying to silence Americans so much and force our country into a dictatorship by making sure that the people who are legal citizens of our country actually get to decide who leads our country, and that the will of the American citizens is not subverted by people who broke our laws to get here. I know, we are so completely unreasonable. The bill instructs states to purge non-citizens from their roles, and there are penalties on officials for slip-ups. Conservatives say that it does stop non-citizens from voting, but liberals claim it's an election fraud myth targeting women and minorities, though it's pretty impossible to make that argument without telling women and minorities that they're not smart enough to get a voter ID like white men are. In fact, the argument of women and minorities being too stupid to handle this is exactly the argument that Sunny Hostin has made.
The reason Democrats don't want voter ID is because they make it much more difficult for elderly people, people that don't travel, don't have a passport, poor people, that don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses. So it's sort of a vestige of, I think, post-slavery laws where Black people had to prove their right to vote.
Black people, women, old people, poor people. What would we all do without Sunny Hostin to save us? I mean, clearly we're not smart enough or capable enough to figure out what we need to do to vote. It's a good thing that she is more intelligent than all of us. Next, she'll be stopping by to wipe the drool from our chins and to fill our sippy cups. Liberals say that the SAVE Act screws married women who changed our names. I guess my citizenship just vanished when I said I do and got married. But newsflash, I don't think that it did. But I do appreciate Representative Lauren Boebert's take on Democrats using women as a shield in this conversation.
And bless my colleagues' hearts on the other side of the aisle, using married women as a gotcha for voting. I've never had to bring my birth certificate to prove that I was a registered voter. I have an ID that has a different name than my birth certificate. And also, since we're using women as bait here, maybe in the next round of debates, they can explain to us exactly what a woman is.
So even if they don't rely on the whole women narrative, it doesn't mean that they don't have other talking points up their sleeve for Democrats to turn this bill into something that it's not.
California.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member Morelli. I rise in strong opposition to the so-called SAVE Act, a bill that is a modern-day poll tax targeting American women and low-income Americans. This bill bans voter ID. It bans using driver's licenses as voter ID unless they're backed by additional proof of citizenship, a requirement that excludes nearly all driver's licenses and real IDs issued today. Now, for women who have changed their names, often through marriage, this means showing a passport or a birth certificate that may not match their legal name. That would have meant that my grandmother, who had long since lost her birth certificate, would have been ineligible to vote under this bill. In California alone, that would include more than 7 million women. Now, this would force those women to pay $130 just to get a passport they need to vote. With nearly a third of Californians lacking passports, this bill would cost them more than $1.25 billion statewide. If you have to pay to vote, that's called a poll tax, plain and simple. It is also unnecessary red tape for people just trying to cast a ballot. This is a bill in search of a problem. We have enough trouble.
Yes, you do have enough trouble. To me, having to pay to get a passport or a birth certificate if you have lost it is probably the least of concerns that Californians have right now, and the amount of money that they pay on other things that are far more useless than a passport or a birth certificate. Probably the things that representatives like this don't want to hear about. A consistent pointing to women and minorities as the specific target of these requests puts the message out there that they know men can do it, but women and minorities can't, which is just disgusting. And just to be clear, having documents in your possession that have your information on them is not a poll tax, because you need those documents for a number of things. So the argument's not working. But of course, Democrats are going to continue to fearmonger on this issue. This post by Hillary Clinton, who we know is all about integrity and honesty, says, "Are you a woman who changed your name when you got married? Congress is considering a bill that could make it much harder for you to vote." To which this lady just above it says, "This is BS. The SAVE Act ties your maiden name to your married name, so you can't vote in 2 different states, and you must prove you are a legal American citizen with legal documents. If your documents are current, it's not a problem." I mean, the bottom line is we get IDs and documents for a number of different things in our lives. If you want to drive a car, or if you even want to buy cold medicine, you figure out how to do it. But if the insulting you isn't reason enough to not listen to these people, let's just give you an example of what happens to your brain when you give in to the Democrat lies and hysteria.
Stop the SAVE Act.
Yes. Can you explain to me what the SAVE Act is?
Well, I mean, if you look things up and if people would actually do their research, it is a part of the 2025 agenda that this administration ran on that they denied. But what it amounts to is people really want to, what they really want to do is they want 1 vote per household. And in order to do that, you have to stop women from voting. And the way that you stop women from voting is that you tell them they have to have 2 forms of ID. Well, you have to have 2 forms of ID, so you have to have a birth certificate.
So it makes it harder.
You have to have a birth certificate, and you have to have a state ID or a driver's license. Well, my last name as a married woman is not going to match. Those items are going to match.
If you are a citizen, you are a citizen. That doesn't change if you get married. And I can see that this woman probably reads every single one of Hillary Clinton's tweets. There is an article in The Federalist that I will link in the description box below if you want to read, that is debunking some of the top myths that are being spread by Democrats about this bill. This is in response to this idea that this is going to make things significantly more difficult for married women. Texas Congressman Chip Roy, who introduced the SAVE Act, told The Federalist, "The leftist manufactured fake news claiming that women, or anyone other than non-citizens, will somehow be prevented from voting. Virtually every married individual will have zero impact because they are already registered to vote and their name is already documented. For the tiny fraction of women who have changed their name right before an election, the SAVE Act explicitly directs states to establish a process for individuals to register if there's a discrepancy in their documents, such as due to a name change," Roy said. "By providing a mechanism to enforce the law, the SAVE Act protects every American citizen's right to vote, preventing their votes from being canceled out by non-citizens voting in federal elections." Based on the talking point that the SAVE Act would disproportionately affect non-white voters, let's have a look at that. It says New York Attorney General Letitia James said in a statement that the SAVE Act would disproportionately impact communities of color, low-income individuals, and other vulnerable populations to create a dangerous precedent. Earlier this year, Stella Adams wrote in Ms. Magazine that the legislation would create disproportionate barriers for historically disenfranchised communities, noting how nearly 9% of voting-age Black Americans lack access to birth certificates and passports compared to 5.5% of white Americans. Countless left-wing organizations have also peddled similar claims while urging Congress to oppose the legislation. But as Hans Spakowski, a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies, explained to The Federalist, such claims, specifically regarding African-American voters, suggest Black Americans won't be able to cope with a proof of citizenship requirement for voting. Spakowski noted how federal immigration law requires all employers to get documentation from new employees proving both their identity and citizenship, or if they are an alien, their identity and work permit. Therefore, any American citizen wanting to get a job, including Black Americans, already have to provide documentation proving they are a U.S. citizen. In other words, the SAVE Act would apply requirements to voting that already exist for working in America. As for the claim that the SAVE Act is unnecessary because non-citizen voting is already illegal, it says Democrats, the corrupt media, and leftist activists relentlessly claim that since it's already illegal for non-citizens to register to vote or vote in federal elections, the SAVE Act is unnecessary. Drunk driving, shoplifting, and stealing a motor vehicle are also illegal, yet all still happen on a yearly, if not daily basis. Despite non-citizen voting being illegal, it still happens. All the SAVE Act would do is add teeth to a largely toothless federal law prohibiting non-citizens from voting. Under current law, prospective voters merely attest they are citizens on a federal registration form under penalty of perjury. It's the honor system, and it's a system that has allowed dozens of non-citizens to vote and register to vote. And the argument of it rarely happens, so it's unnecessary doesn't really hold water, because if it's something that doesn't really happen, then you're not going to mind if we pass a law to stop it. Ultimately, we know that the SAVE Act is just about who gets to vote in our elections. On the right, we're just saying it is keeping non-citizens out of our elections so that they don't dilute our voices, and it makes it the ultimate defense against election fraud. And you would think that the people on the left would be in favor of this because they are so in favor of election integrity that even questioning our elections is an egregious offense. But we know ultimately that the people they're really worried about this bill getting in the way of are non-citizens, because a huge reason why the left wanted to leave our borders open for the last few years is because they were pushing heavily to get driver's licenses for non-citizens so that they can vote in our elections and subvert the will of the people who live here, to minimize the voices of people who actually understand our laws, our values, our rights, and our government, and to overthrow a country led by a constitution that keeps their power in check. They hate that they haven't been able to turn our country into an authoritarian regime yet, with them in total control and with no rights for us. And they need people who know nothing about our country and nothing about them to vote their way to make their authoritarian dreams for America come true. And the SAVE Act crushes those hopes and those aspirations. So as of this morning, the SAVE Act 2025 has passed the House, and Democrats are still fighting hard to keep our election voter rolls from getting cleaned up and getting them securely tightened. But as a woman who has just been told by all of these Democrats that it's going to be so much harder for me to figure it out than it is for my husband, I thank you for your concerns, because I'm sure that they're genuine, and I know you're always looking out for the rights of us birthing people, menstruators, and chest feeders. But I want to reassure you, I got this. In my view, voting is not a right. It is a privilege. It is an honor. It's something that we need to take seriously, and a process that we should respect, and that should not just be granted to anybody who sets foot in this country. I am all for these secure measures, despite the fact that y'all think I'm an idiot, apparently. But please, keep calling women, minorities, the elderly, and the poor stupid, because on the right, we're loving the results of what happens with the way that you guys handle these issues. So that is the SAVE Act 2025 debate. What are your thoughts on this? Is this about voter integrity? Is it about liberal panic? You tell me. Please comment below, like and subscribe if you are in favor of election integrity. Be sure to tap on my face in the left-hand corner of the screen. That is how easy it is to subscribe to my channel. Other than that, keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one.